Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into the complex and often controversial reign of Joseph Stalin. Here are 6 big facts you need to know about his time in power. From the ashes of the Russian Revolution, Stalin emerged not from the fiery heart of the proletariat uprising but from the shadows, a cunning political operator in a sea of revolutionaries. But how did this one man rise to become synonymous with the Soviet Union itself? How did he transform a nation still reeling from Tsarist rule into a global superpower, all while wielding unimaginable power that left millions dead? We often hear the names Stalin, Lenin, Hitler thrown around in history classes, but the connections, the alliances, and the betrayals between these men are often glossed over. How much did Stalin's early collaboration shape his later brutality? And what about the West? Did they stand idly by, or were there attempts at diplomacy and dialogue with a dictator? Over the next few minutes, we're going to unearth 6 lesser-known facts about Stalin's time in power. We're going beyond the headlines and into the heart of a regime that reshaped the 20th century, for better or worse. Get ready, because history, as always, is far more nuanced than we might imagine. To understand Stalin, we need to start with the titan of the revolution himself, Vladimir Lenin. Picture Russia in the early 1900s. A powder keg of social unrest, economic inequality, and simmering resentment towards the Tsar. Lenin, a revolutionary thinker, saw an opportunity.
I wasn't interested in patching up the old system. I wanted to tear it down and build a new one based on Marxist ideals. A socialist utopia.
This is where the Bolsheviks come in. This radical political party, led by Lenin, believed in a swift and decisive seizure of power. And in 1917 they did just that, overthrowing the Tsar and plunging Russia into a chaotic civil war. But here's the thing about revolutions. They're messy, violent affairs, and they often devour their own children. Amidst this chaos, a young, ambitious Stalin found his calling. He wasn't a charismatic orator like Trotsky or a brilliant strategist like Lenin. Stalin was a pragmatist, a behind-the-scenes operator who understood the importance of logistics and control. He rose through the ranks, not by leading grand charges, but by ensuring the Bolsheviks had the resources, manpower, and crucially, the information they needed to win. Lenin recognized Stalin's ruthlessness and administrative talent.
I saw in Stalin someone who could enforce the party line. Someone who wouldn't hesitate to make the tough, often brutal decisions required to consolidate power.
And so began a complex relationship, a partnership forged in revolution that would shape the future of the Soviet Union, for better or worse. Imagine inheriting a vast empire, a patchwork of cultures, languages, and religions, all stitched together under the banner of Tsarist rule. That was the challenge facing the Bolsheviks after the revolution. The question wasn't just about building socialism, it was about holding this sprawling nation together. This is where Stalin's role as the People's Commissar for Nationalities comes into play. It sounds bureaucratic, right? But don't be fooled. This position gave Stalin immense power over the Soviet Union's diverse ethnic groups. He became the architect of their destinies, deciding how much autonomy they'd have, what languages they'd speak, and even how their histories would be written.
On paper, I championed the rights of minorities, advocating for a federation where each group could maintain its cultural identity.
But here's the catch. Stalin's vision of unity was less about genuine respect for diversity and more about centralizing power under his control. He played a dangerous game, exploiting ethnic tensions to weaken potential rivals and solidify his grip on power. He deported entire populations, redrawing the map of the Soviet Union to suit his political agenda. This wasn't just about ideology, it was about control, pure and simple. And it laid the groundwork for the forced assimilation and cultural repression that would become hallmarks of his rule. Picture this, Petrograd 1917. The streets are alive with revolution. Workers, soldiers, and peasants, fueled by the promise of a new world, rise up against the old order. But revolutions need muscle, a force to protect the fragile gains of the uprising. Enter the Red Guards. These weren't your typical soldiers. They were factory workers, miners, and students. Ordinary people who took up arms to defend the revolution. Initially, they were a symbol of popular power, the embodiment of the working class taking control. They fought bravely during the Civil War, defending the Bolsheviks against counter-revolutionary forces. But as with many revolutionary forces, the Red Guards underwent a chilling transformation. As Stalin consolidated his power, he saw in them a tool, a blunt instrument to enforce his will. They were no longer just defending the revolution, they were carrying out purges, silencing dissent, and terrorizing the population.
Imagine living under the constant threat of a knock on the door in the dead of night, knowing it could be the Red Guards coming to arrest you or your loved ones based on flimsy accusations or simply for being perceived as a threat.
This wasn't the socialist paradise promised by the revolution. It was the beginning of a reign of terror that would leave millions dead. History often paints Stalin as an isolated figure, a paranoid dictator holed up in the Kremlin. But the reality is far more complex. Stalin understood that power wasn't just about what happened within the Soviet Union's borders. It was about navigating the treacherous waters of international relations. And that meant dealing with some of history's most notorious figures.
Let's talk about Hitler. In 1939, these two dictators, each with their own expansionist ambitions, signed a non-aggression pact, shocking the world. It was a marriage of convenience, each using the other to buy time and secure their borders. But I knew this wouldn't last. I had studied Hitler, understood his ideology, and knew that war was inevitable.
Then there's Mussolini. The Italian dictator, with his dreams of a new Roman Empire, initially saw Stalin as a threat to his own fascist vision. But as the political landscape shifted, they found common ground in their shared disdain for democracy and their willingness to use violence to achieve their goals. These weren't friendships. They were alliances forged in the fires of political expediency. Stalin used these relationships to strengthen his position, playing his cards carefully on the global stage. He might have despised these men, but he understood that sometimes you have to sup with the devil to get what you want. What business did Lyndon B. Johnson have with Stalin? During Stalin's reign, the US and USSR had numerous issues, from ideological clashes to the arms race. However, there were positive outcomes from these exchanges, such as the establishment of diplomatic channels and the eventual easing of tensions during the Cold War. These interactions laid the groundwork for future diplomacy and cooperation, even amidst the rivalry. When we think of Stalin and the United States, images of Cold War tensions, nuclear threats, and the Iron Curtain often come to mind. And while those tensions were very real, the relationship between these two superpowers was far more nuanced than a simple story of good versus evil.
Let's rewind to World War II. The US and the Soviet Union, despite their ideological differences, found themselves on the same side, united against a common enemy in Nazi Germany. They might have been uneasy allies, but they shared a common goal: defeating Hitler. And in the crucible of war, there were moments of cooperation, of shared sacrifice, that hinted at the possibility of a different kind of relationship.
Take, for instance, the Lend-Lease Act. The US, recognizing the Soviet Union's desperate need for resources, provided billions of dollars worth of aid, everything from food and clothing to tanks and planes. This wasn't just charity. It was a strategic calculation, a recognition that the Soviet Union's survival was crucial to defeating Hitler.
Even after the war, as the Cold War cast its long shadow, there were attempts at dialogue. Take the Yalta Conference, where Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill met to discuss the post-war order. These were tense negotiations, each leader jockeying for position, but there were also moments of agreement, a recognition that the world couldn't afford another global conflict. These were small victories, glimmers of hope in an increasingly divided world.
Stalin's death in 1953 sent shockwaves throughout the Soviet Union and the world. For decades, he'd been the unquestioned leader, his image plastered on every wall. But with his death came a thaw, a slow process of dismantling his cult of personality.
Enter Nikita Khrushchev, who survived Stalin's purges to become the new Soviet leader. In 1956, he denounced Stalin's crimes in a closed-door session. This marked the beginning of de-Stalinization, a period of political reforms. Political prisoners were released, labor camps closed, and censorship relaxed. It was a period of uncertainty, but also hope for a more open society.
So, there you have it. 6 facts about Stalin's reign that provide a glimpse into the man behind the mustache, the complexities of his rule, and the lasting impact he had on the Soviet Union and the world. From his unlikely partnership with Lenin, to his chilling use of the Red Guards, from his calculated dealings with fellow dictators, to the unexpected moments of diplomacy with the US, Stalin's story is a reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's a story of revolution and terror, of power consolidated and power challenged, of a nation forged in the fires of ideology and reshaped by the realities of the 20th century. And as we've seen, the legacy of Stalin's reign is still felt today in the politics of Russia, in the memories of those who lived through his rule, and in the ongoing debate over how to reconcile his crimes with his achievements. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more historical insights. See you next time.